Hi, this is JL Zaring with 1LifeLive, and I wanted to get out here early this morning to talk about building an off-road 4x4 vehicle, or as some might say it, an overland vehicle. And then after this video, I will then make a separate video talking about the specs of my 1LifeLive rig. If you hear any background noise, there is a main highway behind me. I do have this cool little microphone. Hopefully this directional microphone will mostly pick up me and not the road behind me, but let's see how it goes. And I wanted to catch this nice background. As most know, Southern California and all of California is getting plenty of water and is turning green finally. Thank goodness. Okay, first I wanted to mention, you can come over here, and I will say that for a 4x4 vehicle or off-road vehicle or overland vehicle, I would recommend putting the largest size tires on it for the vehicle, in which case the vehicle can handle those tires efficiently. And that last part is the most important part. For example, this is a full-sized Ford Expedition 2007. You can see these are 35s by 12.5s on a 17-inch rim. It's about the largest size tire that fits this particular vehicle efficiently with minimal cutting, if any, and it handles very well. Now, other vehicles, it could be possibly 33-inch tires. It could possibly be 31-inch tires. Keep this in mind, though. When you do go off-road, you will be airing down. So when you air down to sometimes 20 psi, when you air down to sometimes 15 or even 10, you will lose clearance out of your tires. So your 35-inch tires will lose a few inches, or your 33-inch tires will lose a few inches. I have even had to pump my tires back up in extreme rocky conditions, because even though it warranted possibly 10 psi, the clearance just dropped too low, and I put it back up to around 16 or 18 just to gain another inch or so. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Another thing is to get a little lift out of your off-road vehicle. Now, lift also includes front clearance and rear clearance. I did my best with this rig to clear as much as possible with cutting as much as I could away from the front and the rear for front approach angles and rear approach angles, even grinding metal away and such. And then I lifted the front about 4 inches in the front and about 3.75 inches in the rear. The whole point is you're going to be going over rough terrain. And again, you want to do this lift efficiently. Now, when I talk about lift, I'm talking about suspension lift. I am not talking about body lift. There's a big difference. Body lift does nothing for the suspension clearance underneath. So, in fact, I recommend against a body lift. A body lift will only take your center of gravity and put it up in the air, which throws off your off-road rig as far as off balance, especially on steep side angles, going uphill, downhill, and mostly, of course, if you have to go sideways on hills, which is the least fun going off-road. So body lifts are more for looks, and it's not really functional for off-road use, I guess you can say. But you definitely want some type of lift along with the tires to get off the ground for better clearance over obstacles. And of course, that comes in play with good off-road tires. Now, when I say good off-road tires, that can be an all-terrain tire or a mud tire. These are Nitto Trail Grapplers. So far, I have been extremely pleased with them on highway and off highway. The balance has been excellent, both on and off. I have never had any balance issues whatsoever. Excuse me for a second. There you go. And I recommend also for the wheel size a 17-inch wheel. You will see all sorts of wheel sizes out there from 17 to 20 inch. The thinking of a 17-inch wheel, and you can look here, you have more rubber for off-road. This rubber is more play, more cushion, more give when going over rocks and terrain, especially when you air down. So when you air down, that acts as more spread on the land. So when you air down, the tire flattens out more and gives more cushion, grip, and support for your vehicle. When you have larger wheels, then you have smaller tires, and that only acts against you in extreme off-road use. The other thing to keep in mind is you will be hitting rocks and such going off-road. So if you have thin rubber and large wheels, those wheels can get much more damaged. With saying that, no matter what, your wheels will get damaged over time. And don't worry about that. You know what? They're battle scars. It looks pretty cool. As you can see right here, I have beadlock rings. There are some damage on there. Every once in a while, yeah, I paint them. But you know what? I also think it's cool. It's like it's like scars from war, okay? It just looks cool. But paint them if you want, if it bothers you. Now, I mentioned beadlock rings. Those are beadlock rings. The reason for that is when you lower the pressure of the tires a lot, especially when you have a lot of torque in the engine, or you're doing certain twisting with the harsh terrain, you can knock the tire off the bead of the wheel. Hence, that beadlock ring traps the bead of the tire in between the wheel and bolts it, holding it between the ring, the rubber, and the wheel with all those bolts. And it works pretty darn good. I have not had a single issue with that at all. And that is well worth it too. The last thing you really want to deal with off-road is a busted bead, is to pop your tire off your wheel and have to deal with that off-road. So we've covered the tires, the wheels, the suspension. Obviously, if you could get an off-road suspension, that's great. Usually an off-road suspension incorporates a larger shock tube, a stronger coilover with a larger shock tube with more oil for going up and down. And some even have reservoirs in them. especially like, let's say like the Raptor trucks that do a lot of fast, rough terrain. But you don't have to have the reservoirs. Most people don't drive that fast or do that much jumping. Let me switch hands. Wow, I had no idea it was going to be this cold this morning. It's in the low 30s, in case my face is turning like red and white from the absolute cold. Now I know it's not that cold, but for Southern California, low 30s, around 32 degrees is sort of cold for Southern California. So I'm definitely not complaining too much for the people where it's snow everywhere, like Idaho, for example. Okay. As you see, these steps, these are not common steps. These are part of the protection of the off-road vehicle. Protection is huge. I mentioned this in one of my past videos, is to have skid plates. One story I told a long time ago is how a white paint bucket, an empty white paint bucket, plastic, 5-gallon, took out my rig on the freeway simply because I hit it. I had no skid plates. It severed different wires and hoses, took out the whole rig. So I recommend as many skid plates as possible that is offered for your rig, and there's plenty of places that do custom skid plates for your rig. And I would highly recommend that as far as covering your front differentials, your oil pan, transfer case, rear differentials, fuel tank, and then, as you can see here, these are the steps, but these are also connected straight to the frame. So those are not connected to the body of the car. Those are called rock sliders, as many of you already know. To give you an idea, these are made for a 4-door Jeep. So the Ford Expedition really is not, the wheelbase is not that much larger than a 4-door Jeep. It's only about 2 inches. 2 inches. Longer than a 4-door Jeep. So the Ford Expedition off-road does very, very well. And I simply grabbed the rock sliders for a 4-door Jeep, welded them to the frame, and what that does is when you're going off-road, and if you hit any rocks, that will not, the rocks then will not damage your actual body of the car. It'll hit the rock sliders and essentially slide. That's why they're called sliders. The car slides instead of getting damaged and bent and all screwed up. Okay, let's go on the front here. Now, as you see from the front, there's different lights, more protection, a winch. You see different recovery points. Recovery points are big. With recovery points, you want them you want them mounted correctly. Meaning, I've seen different recovery points mounted very incorrectly, not on the body of the car, and that is not good, as they are not rated as recovery points, and you will simply just rip out whatever you're trying to pull from. So let me try to give you a better view. Okay, there's some different recovery points there. You don't have to have a winch. However, I do feel that a winch is very important, especially when going alone off-road. And so I would recommend a winch to you because not all the time are you going to have a partner. And I have seen more than one time, more than one person stuck at more than one time. So a winch can definitely come in handy, especially when you're out in the middle of nowhere. You don't want to pay for a tow truck that'll cost you $1,000 to come get you. Or Your cell phones don't work, and I'll talk about that later, how you should have like a satellite texter, for example. But a winch will come in handy sometime, most likely if you are an avid off-roader. Basically, it's called insurance. You might not ever need it, but it's there for when you really get stuck and you can't get out. Speaking of really getting stuck, let's talk quickly about the 4x4 systems, which I've mentioned before, and it's really good to know about. I would always recommend, of course, to have your off-road vehicle be a 4x4, but there are different types of 4x4 systems. I would not recommend having an open differential 4x4 system. That is where basically it's a 4x4 system, but really it's only two-wheel drive, meaning it's very little traction due to the fact that at almost any given time, two tires most likely will be slipping, one in the front and one in the rear. So you're only going to be having two tires going, and those are going to be the ones slipping. So I would always recommend either limited slip, front and rear, or having lockers, front and rear, or some type of system that mimics lockers, front and rear. The Ford Expedition has a system called Control Track, and track is T-R-A-C, how they spell it, and that is an electronic system that mimics lockers, front and rear. And I'll tell you what, it is almost identical to front and rear lockers. I have gone off-road with Jeeps with lockers, Hummers with lockers. I have done every obstacle they have done, and it keeps up with them perfectly, just the same, handles just the same, behaves just the same, and I absolutely cannot tell the difference with riding in either of the different various vehicles. So that is the nice thing, that if you do have a Ford Expedition, see if it has Control Track, and the main thing with that, to enable Control Track, is the traction control button called Advance Track needs to be off. So that button, you have to press it off. You can be in 4 high or 4 low, and the Control Track will then be engaged either instantly, or the tires will slip for a few seconds and then it'll be engaged. I think the sun is just coming up. I'll probably have to grab my hat in a second. Okay. Lights. Lights are always a very nice thing to have off-road. It just brightens you up. Do you have to have them? No, you don't. You don't have to have them with building your off-road vehicle. Is it nice to have them? Yes. I am walking around to the rear. Okay. Getting out of the sun real quick. With the rear, I have 3 recovery points. As you can see, these are into the frame. Again, I mentioned that earlier. Make sure you have enough recovery points. The reason is that you never know which ends are going to be in the mud, sticking out, what's going to be available to even grab. Now, the winch I have in the front is actually a multi-mount winch, which I can remove from the front and put in the rear hitch if needed. So I can use the winch from the front or the rear. I also added lights to the back, which help. Again, you don't need them. It's just an added benefit. On the top, if you can see, I know the sun is coming up, so that could be an issue, but I have a rack. With that rack, the nice thing with the rack is you can carry things like a shovel, high lift jack, various tools such as the traction ramps. The traction ramps are great because if you're stuck, you can add them under the tires to help gain traction to get you out of sand, snow, mud. I carry 4 of them. I also carry large stakes. If there's absolutely nothing to get onto, you can hammer in long 4-foot stakes to the ground. You can then get them out with your high lift jack later on. So all of these various tools can be carried on your roof rack. Now, one thing I mentioned in the past is that with a roof rack, again, with talking about center of gravity, you do not want a 300-pound heavy-duty roof rack for off-roading. So you want to try to get a very lightweight. You can still get it strong, but a lightweight tubular roof rack. So the center of gravity weight is not up high. And the roof rack can really help on longer trips, especially with overlanding, with loading a lot of lightweight stuff to free up the cab. I am going to get my hat. Okay. Probably my glasses too. Oh, I tried to beat the sun. Let me see what time it is. The gorgeous green hills. You can get a little look of the gorgeous green hills here before they turn brown. I think most was covered as far as building an off-road vehicle. Again, you want clearance, so that's why you do a basic lift. That's also why you add on the largest tires that'll work the most efficiently for your vehicle. And with that being said, you do not do a body lift, which will only harm you for off-road use. We went over all the skid plates, how that'll only protect you for all the off-road things you'll run into. Let's see. Oh, here you go. Up here you can look at the high lift jack I have mounted and the shovel. One thing I will mention is that I do keep things locked up. Unfortunately, as you know, honest people still do silly things like trying to steal, so more or less these are just simple locks to keep the honest person a tad more honest. The one last thing before I go that I did not mention yet, which I did mention in one of the first videos, is of course with building an off-road vehicle or overland vehicle, a lot of people like to put lots of cabinets and all these things in there. That is great. It is cool. Keep in mind the weight factor. I choose not to use cabinets. I use a lot of toolboxes, waterproof toolboxes that I can remove from the rig and add to the rig when I want. That's just my preference. Now, tools and gear and all that is a whole separate, I guess you can say, topic. And I'll do some more videos on that as far as what tools you should bring with you, and then what safety equipment you should bring with you, and what rescue equipment you should bring with you. But as far as building an off-road rig, most of it was covered. One additional thing that can also be added to off-road rigs is a snorkel. I myself at this moment do not have a snorkel. A snorkel is where you connect an air intake that goes up the side on either side that connects to the air intake of the engine, which takes it above water. So if you are doing a lot of off-roading in places that has a lot of water, that prevents the air intake from sucking in water, which is the absolute last thing you want. And speaking of air intake, there is the exhaust. Real quick here. Did you see the exhaust? No. I cut it off. Basically, you do not want your exhaust to get hung up on rocks or caught or scraped. I don't know how many times I have seen exhausts going down steep angles or up steep angles. They get caught, bent, twisted, torn, yanked off, whatever. So just cut it off. It's really not needed. When you cut it off though, just make sure you angle it to where it's not exhausting into anything, because it does get hot. And over time, that heat will destroy whatever it's hitting. So just make sure it's pointing down or slightly angled away into the open air, and not like, let's say, towards the spare tire, for example. And there you go. That's, I think, one of the last things I forgot to mention, the spare tire. It's good to always have at least one full-size spare tire. Not a half size. That is a half-ass spare tire. Do not have a half-ass spare tire. Have a full-size spare tire on a full-size wheel to match your other tires and wheels exactly. You want that because if you're in the middle of nowhere having a wonderful time on a wonderful trip, you don't want a half-ass spare tire that will then, especially if you have lockers and such, will not match the exact rotation of the other side of your tire. That's not cool. That'll mess things up. So just spend the extra money and get a full-size spare tire. If it doesn't fit underneath, see if you can take your grinder and grind away as much as you can under there to see if it can fit. I was able to do that with my grinder, and I fit a full-size 35-inch under there, where before only like a 32 or 33 could fit under there. And I could fit a full-size 35. Some guys carry 2 spares. That's up to you, but at least one full-size spare tire. Okay, I think that's about it for now. I'm sure I missed some things, but these are just the basics about building an off-road vehicle and things to consider, the reasons why. And next, I will do a video about more specifics as far as what I have on this rig with suspension and such. So stay tuned for that. Please like, please subscribe. I hope you're enjoying these, and stay tuned for more. Take care. Okay, I'm back. I thought I would be gone, and you probably thought I'd be gone on this video, but I'm back. I had to get out of the sun, warm up a little bit, and then I wanted to come back and explain a few more things so you can completely understand what I meant with the suspension, body lift, and then I wanted to add one more thing about wheelbase. So what I meant with suspension, first off, with body lift only raises the body. So that's why it doesn't help as far as getting anything else off the ground. Now with the suspension, if you add a larger suspension lift or a longer suspension, it can actually help get particular rigs off the ground, and in certain aspects with how you think every rig higher off the ground. And I will explain that to you. So first off, if you have independent suspension such as the Ford Expedition, when you put higher or taller suspension on, such as the Icon coilover suspension, which has a 3-inch lift, it actually raises the control arms at an angle, which then lifts the entire rig off the ground. And of course you can only do it so high, because then the control arms can only get so steep until it tops out. But in essence, it actually lifts the rig off the ground. Now, the most important thing to get your rig off the ground is, of course, the tires. That is why I said to put on the largest tires possible that work the most efficiently for your off-road rig, or for an off-road rig you're building or picking. And like for this vehicle, it's 35-inch tires. I know for Ford Raptor, 37-inch tires. Jeeps, a lot of guys can get away with 37-inch tires. Now mind you, whenever you add on larger things, it's a domino effect, and it can affect other things, such as with Jeeps. When you add on 37-inch tires, you then have to add on other stronger components, such as axles. That's just one quick example for you to think about. Now, other off-road vehicles with live axles. Jeep is an example. If you add on longer or taller suspension, a lifted suspension, that necessarily won't lift the Jeep higher off the ground like you would think. The differentials are still going to be basically off the ground the same distance. However, what does lift higher off the ground is when you travel over rough terrain, your tires will articulate higher off the ground. And what that means is, which is very important to understand with any off-road vehicle, is when you go over rough terrain, the higher your tires can lift up, that means your tires are staying on the ground and have traction to the ground and power to the ground. And I'm sure you have seen it on videos, or maybe even your own rig. If you have limited suspension and it only lifts so high off the ground, your tire will then lift completely off the ground, and you will no longer have traction or power to that tire at all to the ground. So that is why it is very important to have a eventually good suspension. Off-road suspension, which adds thicker tubes, more oil for better cooling, and of course longer travel, which gives you better articulation, which can then raise your tires higher off the ground. And of course, as explained, some vehicles, such as with independent suspension, it can raise your entire rig higher off the ground, such as the Ford Expedition. Now, which brings us back to the tires. Again, a critical point of adding the largest tire possible, because for some off-road vehicles with live axles, that is the only thing that does raise the vehicle off the ground. That's why a lot of guys love the 37s or 35 tires. 35s seem to be the sweet tire for most off-road vehicles, with minimal cutting and minimal other upgrades to compensate for the larger size 35-inch tire. And it also handles pretty well on the highway, and with little issues as far as braking and cornering and such, compared to the larger tires of 37-inch, 40-inch, 44-inch. Those are quite extreme. Last but not least, for the people that are searching for an off-road vehicle, let's say they don't have one yet and they have the option to search for one, is the wheelbase to consider. A good wheelbase, from what I have seen and studied and talked to other guys and other people, is more or less around 120 inches more or less and under. To give you an example, the Ford Expedition, I believe off the top of my head, is 118 or 119 inches. The four-door Jeeps, I believe, are 117 inches. That is just a quick example to give you an idea of basic wheelbases. So anything shorter than 117 inches are obviously the one-door Jeeps and the smaller trucks, and anything longer than 119 inches are obviously the trucks as well. Now, which comes back to the larger tires, because if you have a longer wheelbase of 119 inches but smaller tires, that is where, when you're going over extreme trails, extreme articulation, is when you can bottom out, or high center in the center, when the center starts to hit. And of course, that's why it's good to have the guards and rock sliders, but that adds friction. When you have all that added friction, not only can it cause damage, but of course it slows down your rig off-road. And I've seen it so many times, and that's what stops the vehicle, high centers the vehicle. And so those are all different things to consider. So I hope that better helps explain as far as lifting the vehicle, the different ways you can lift the vehicle with tires, if you have independent suspension, if you have live axles, and how body lifts don't lift the vehicle at all. Body lifts do not help the vehicle articulate any better. It might add some clearance if needed, if you have a very extreme travel for your tires, so that could help. But again, the higher you lift it, the higher center of gravity you're going to have, which can just throw your vehicle off when you're going off-road. Okay, I think I've now covered everything I want to cover. So take care. Again, please like, please subscribe. And next coming up, we'll be going over my particular off-road rig and all the specs that I have. So stay tuned for that. Thank you much.